We are, of course, in the midst of Parshat Mishpatim, which discusses laws. As we've spoken, say it again for the third time this week, we've moved from the ideals, the goals, Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 utterances, to the weeds, to the details therein. And when we look, one of the more intriguing aspects when we start to look at the text from the book of Shmot is in the middle of Perek Chaf Bet. In the middle of Perek Chaf Bet, God tells us to not to abuse the orphan, the widow. It tells us not. God tells us not to do these things, and when doing so, God says a very interesting thing. God says that if you do that, v'chara api, v'haragti etchem becharev, v'hayu nishechem almanot uvnechem yitomim in 22:23. If you mistreat the orphan, the widow, the stranger, I will hear their cry and my anger will blaze forth, and I will put you to the sword, and your own wife shall become widows, and your children orphans. And it's something that we've looked at and we've talked about in the past, which is God has taken the Jews out of Egypt. We're going to build a society that's not like Egypt. If you build a society that is like the Egyptian society, one not of kindness and compassion and equity and equality, but one that doesn't have those things, then there's no reason for having a Jewish society. You should go back into exile. And so here God is saying, the same way I listened to you guys when you cried out, when you were abused by the Egyptians, and I listened to your voice, I sided with the weak rather than with the strong, as it's oftentimes was considered in the ancient world. I'm going to listen to the weak as well. And that's something that's very interesting about these laws here. They're ethically oriented and they impose divine accountability. God is protecting vulnerable populations. And that's something that's different with other ancient law codes, as we've spoken about before. In the Code of Hammurabi, really have property owners, social classes. Slaves are mostly property. Here we're concerned about the slave. We talked, was it yesterday, where, right, if you punch your slave and you knock out his tooth, the slave goes free. In the Code of Hammurabi, the damages that are assessed are less than if you punch out the tooth or the eye of a free person. For us, no, the damages are worse to the master who abuses his slave. His slave goes free. We have this ethical aspect. The strangers, the widows, the orphans are seen even more so. And there is divine oversight. There's moral obligation. In the Code of Hammurabi, it's state-administered codes is what there are. And here we have divine wrath. There then, and death, loss of family. Here there's monetary fines in the Code of Hammurabi, physical punishment. And so there's much more social justice here. There's much more protection of the vulnerable, as opposed to the Code of Hammurabi is much more proportional justice. And we have to maintain the social hierarchy. We're supposed to be moving away from the social hierarchy. The Torah is emphasizing ethics and human dignity, not just restitution. We're moving away. And that's very important here. And we said that again, we'll repeat what we said last week. What's different versus the Aseret HaDibrot? Hammurabi starts, God gave me, King Hammurabi, the following laws to tell you, as opposed to the Aseret HaDibrot, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. This is coming from God and it's relevant to everybody. There's nobody who's above the law. Everybody, even Moshe, the law applies to him and it applies to everybody. It's not about maintaining a certain social class system. We're supposed to be moving away from that sort of class system. And so we have a big disagreement here in the viewpoint of the covenantal code of the Torah. We can call it the Brit versus Hammurabi, which is about a king and a state, and right where that's who needs to remain in in power. Let's talk about a couple of other aspects. So when we move into into Perek Chaf Gimel, and into sort of the fourth aliyah of Parshat Mishpatim, we start to talk about lying and perverting justice. So in Perek Chaf Gimel, Pasuk Aleph, let me read it to you. It says, scrolling, Lo tisa shema shav, al tashet yadcha rasha liot eid chamas. You must not carry false rumors. You shall not join hands with the guilty to act as a malicious witness, right? And this is not just about lying in court. It's about the social responsibility of truth. Even if it's easier, safer, advantageous to lie, the Torah prohibits lying. And we see that in many other places in the Torah about not perverting judgment. And that's the foundation for ethical witnesses in all areas of life. In the next couple of verses, we move into not just favoring the majority in wrongdoing and not giving preferential treatment to the poor or rich if they are wrong. For the Torah, truth and justice are independent of social pressures. That's sadly the way it is. You cannot lie. In the Torah. That's not sadly the way it is. That's oftentimes the way it is in life. You're not allowed to lie to protect friends or powerful people. You cannot be intimidated by a group's majority opinion into doing injustice. The Torah believes in radical impartiality. The Torah elevates the principles of a way one speaks and the way one is supposed to act above personal, social, or political pressures, insisting that truth is the backbone of society. And we know that that's not such an easy thing. We know that we have that all too often. The people who are in charge, the people who are the strongest, are the ones who oftentimes are protected by the law. That's not what the Torah says here. Moving up now for a second from, we'll come back to the lying in a second. Verse 5 brings up a situation. Ki tir'eh chamor sona'acha rovet tachat masa'o v'chadalta me'azav lo azov ta'azov imo. So what happens if you're walking down the street and you see your enemy's donkey? I shouldn't say enemies. I don't like that translation of soneh, somebody who you hate. And the donkey is carrying too much, and it's burdened and it's falling down. So what the Torah says, you can't pretend that you don't see him. You're not allowed to refrain from raising it. You have to help that person, even though that person is somebody who you hate. Now, there's a whole long, big discussion in the Gemara that discusses this in Masechet Psachim about how can you hate somebody? The Torah says don't hate somebody, and how can you can't say that it's a non-Jew? It has to be a Jew, and how can you hate them? There's a whole long discussion about the idea. Torah will get into a Parshat Kedoshim. We'll talk about perhaps some of those things. Lo tisnat achicha bilvavecha. But what's really fascinating about this, more than anything else, there are many things, and two things I want to point out. Number one, and we may have said this in the past, the golden rule of Jewish life, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, even though it's formulated by Hillel in the negative, meaning that which you don't want done unto yourself, do not do unto others. Don't harm another if you don't want another to harm you. Don't steal from another if you don't want somebody to steal from you. Don't kill another if you don't want to be killed, etc., etc. That's not enough for the Torah. The Torah is not enough to not harm others. The Torah is a book that demands of us to take action. Right? You might say, here, oh, I don't like that guy. I hate him. He was mean to me. I'm going to ignore him. I shouldn't help him. The Torah says that's not enough. You actually have to go and help a person. It's not enough to not cause him further harm. If you see the donkey struggling, it belongs to your friend, then you need to go help it. Now, I don't think that this is being done here for the sake of Tsar Balei Chaim, even though we value animals and we shouldn't let the animals suffer. This is more about the relationship between people and the obligation that you have to actually act good. The Torah doesn't demand of us not just to not do bad unto others. We're actually obligated to go and do something actively and good. And that is something that is really, I don't know if it's unique, but it's part of what the Torah is about, which is not one of the only things the Torah is about. It commands and demands and getting us to get up and do, not to remain silent and not to just not do anything and everything's going to be okay. It's inconvenient. I do not want to help that person. So I need to, even that person, I need to help. The Torah demands of us action. You cannot stand idly by, not only by the blood of your brother, but even with this person. And so I'm not getting into the details and specifics of you see somebody who is on the side of the road and it looks looks like their tire and their car has right, it's flat tire, et cetera, et cetera. There are personal risks in situations like that. There are people who've been carjacked, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not telling you what you have to do, but the idea of the Torah is if you see it and you know that person, even if you don't like that person, and you think that they might be help, even if you don't know how to fix the tire, you pull over, maybe their phone is broken, maybe they don't have AAA, whatever it might be, that you should go. The Torah is demanding of us to do. It's not enough to not harm. We need to actively do and help somebody. And that's number one. Second thing that's very interesting about this verse, about Pasuk Hey, is that there is another verse like this in Sefer Devarim, in Parshat Shoftim. And in Parshat Shoftim, we have a verse that's like this. And the verse there talks about, there's one major difference. Here, the verse says, if you see the donkey of your soneh, of your enemy, in Parshat Kitetse, in Sefer Devarim, the person in this case whose donkey is struggling under his load is not described as the person who you hate, but is described as your friend. So the situations between the two places are basically the same, but it changes from the person who you hate to the person who is your friend. And the rabbis' commentaries point out something beautiful. And they say, back in the book of Exodus, this person was your enemy. But what happened? He is his property. He was struggling, and you went and you said, "Oh, let me go and help you with this problem." And therefore, by the time we get to Sefer Devarim, he's no longer your enemy. He is now your friend. Let me see if I can find the verse in Deuteronomy where it says basically the same thing. So, but it's a beautiful idea that the Torah is saying you have to be active. You have to go and do something. Oh, and here I managed to find it. It says as follows: Lo tireh et chamor achicha oshoro nofel baderech vihistarta me'azro ta'azov lo. What it says there is, you shall not see your brother's donkey or his ox fallen on the road and ignore it. You have to help him. You have to lift it up. And so what happens here, if you ignore that person and you don't help them, he was your enemy or somebody you hate or somebody you dislike, and you continue to dislike him, you continue to hate him, he continues to be his enemy. But if you don't ignore, and like the Torah says and demands of you, you go over there, you help him. Maybe it glosses over your problems and you move forward. Or maybe you discuss the problems that the two of you have for each other and he sees you're not so bad, and maybe you see he's not so bad, and you move forward. But either way, a mitzvah allows for the repairing of a relationship. A mitzvah allows, when you actively go doing it, for you to make a connection with somebody else. And that's part of the beauty. And it's again part of the larger idea here. The laws in Mishpatim, the weeds are coming from the Aseret HaDibrot. It's all about, ultimately, the values. It's all about creating the moral society. So how we treat different people, the obligation to do mitzvot, ultimately, The hope is in the Torah. The demand is in the Torah, is that we build this beautiful society where the widows and the orphans and the people who are at risk and the strangers are not calling out to God because there has been injustice and they've been mistreated. No, just the opposite. They are being treated well. And as a result of that, God will be proud of the society, and it will be society that can flourish and remain. And hopefully, it's not so easy, but we hope that that's the road that all of our communities are on and that the state of Israel is on. And it's not so easy. Society's people, we make mistakes, but if we know the goal and the end game, then hopefully we strive our hardest to reach it.